Welcome to another episode of English Speaking Made Easy. As usual, we have our very first segment for you, which is the Grammar Express. In today's Grammar Express, we are going to cover a very important part of English grammar, which is the tenses. And among the tenses, I am going to start with the simple present tense. Now, the term might seem rather unfamiliar, but if I tell you how to use it, I am sure it would seem, you would understand how its use goes. A simple present tense is used for many reasons. And the form of the tense is you will have a subject. It could be I, it could be you, it could be a name, John or Mary. It will have a subject which will be followed by the verb, the bare verb. The verb will not have any helping auxiliaries like a was or a is or a have or a has. No, neither will it have an ing form to denote action. It will be just the base form of the verb, and then you will have the object. So if a sentence like this, I love chocolates or I like chocolates, that is an example of a simple present tense. You see the subject I, you see the verb like and chocolates, no auxiliaries, no ing forms. Okay, that's how the simple present tense is formed. Now, when do we use simple present tense? First, we use it to describe facts and habits, with things which are true all the time. The sun rises in the east. The sun rises in the east. It always snows here in January. It's a fact. Dave plays chess in the evenings. That is more like a habit. So, whenever you have something which is a fixed fact, or when you have something which is a habit that you do, we use the simple present tense. Okay? We also use the simple present tense to include time expressions like always, every year, never, often. So, when we use these time expressions, we create sentences like this. I go to temple every morning. We visit Japan every year. He usually goes for a movie on weekends. When we use these time expressions also, we can create good simple present tense sentences. Another form, another use of the simple present tense is, it is to describe scheduled events in the future. So, remember that when something is part of a timetable, let's say when you have a train timing or a flight timing, it's part of a timetable. You have your, if you're in school or college, you have a timetable. This is all part of a timetable which is set for the future. Simple present tense is used to express that idea too. The train gets in at 5 o'clock, that's part of the schedule. The train gets in at 5 o'clock. So, when you want to speak about scheduled events in the future too, we use a simple present tense. Another use of the simple present tense is to tell stories, particularly jokes, to make your reader or listener feel more engaged with the story. Let's see how we can do it with simple present tense. Okay, imagine I'm telling you a story of a horse. Okay, the story goes like this. A horse walks into the bar and the barman says, "Why the long face?" Okay, if I were to compare that to a sentence where I don't use a simple present tense, I would not be able to emote it this well. My sentence would be, a horse walked into the bar and the barman said, "Why the long face?" In the first instance, you see, you can bring in a lot more drama and engage the listener quite a lot. So, for that added impact, we sometimes use a simple present tense. Okay. Another example, we heard the helicopter overhead. Suddenly, the radio bursts into life. So, this is also this is called a fictional present tense, wherein we are giving it's not something which actually happens, but we are creating, for added effect, we are creating a fictional scenario there, and the radio bursts into noise that way. So, that is another example of how we can use a simple present tense for added effect. So, just let me recap the whole thing for you. We use a simple present tense to express something which is an accepted fact or a habit. We also use simple present tense with time expressions like always, every day, every year, sometimes, etc. We also use simple present tense to talk about, we add that when we want to give effect to a narrative. Okay, so when we do all that, we generally add the simple present tense. It's simple to create a negative form too with the simple present tense. You only need to add a word do not. So if I were to give a sentence, I like chocolates, the negative form is simple, I do not like chocolates. Or if I say he likes chocolates, he does not like chocolates. Just add a do or does not and I can create a negative from a simple present tense positive form. Okay, so that's how you create negatives there. Now, how do we create a question from a simple present tense form? Just give you two simple examples and that will make it clear to you. If remember the example I gave you before, I like chocolates. Now, that is a statement. I want to make that into a question. I want to say, I like chocolates. If I want to ask you that question, I would say, do you like chocolates? Do I like chocolate? Do they like chocolate? So I've added do there followed by the subject. Why does it always snow here in January? Now I can also use a question using the question words why, when and what. So when these words are added, a simple present tense question would be, when Dawn play chess? Why do you like chocolate? So I can also make questions using question words like when, which and what, and I can also use it by adding words like do or does. So I've given you examples now, so you can understand that's how you create questions from a simple present tense form. Okay. Now in the simple present tense form, there is it is quite easy to, the structure is quite easy as I mentioned before. So you will only need to pay attention to the first person, second person and third person. That is when we use I, you and he, she and they, because that is when the form of the verb can tend to change. Otherwise, the structure of a simple present tense sentence is simple. I'll just give you a small run through as to how we create sentences there. Beginning with a first person, I go out for dinner every weekend. So the form of the verb is go. If I use we also, it is we go out for dinner every weekend. But on the other hand, if I am using a third person singular, I cannot say he. A third person singular is he or she. When I use he or she, I say he goes out for dinner every weekend or she goes out for dinner every weekend. Now coming back to a third person plural, they, I would say they go out for dinner every weekend. If I am using a second person you, I would say do you go out for dinner or you go out for dinner every weekend. So the change comes in when we add the first person, second person and third person. Otherwise, the form of a simple present tense sentence is very, very easy to understand. And we do tend to make quite a lot of errors, especially when we do not know how to use the first, second and third person effectively. Just a quick recap on what the first person is. The first person is I and we. The second person is you. The third person is he, she, singular, and they for plural. So depending on how the person or the subject changes, the verb form also can change, which we need to pay a little bit of attention, especially with words like do and go. Okay, so that's one thing you need to remember, or else it's quite easy to frame a simple present tense sentence. Now we are moving on to our next section, Lexica, your guide to good vocabulary. Today I am going to deal with certain words related to crime and punishment, the kind of words that we relate to law, to crime and to punishment. Let's just go through a few words there and I am sure you will be able to use them in many contexts. Okay. Now the first word I have there is the word capital punishment. Now this is a much debated, much talked about word, and this word means the death penalty. When you give the death penalty to a criminal, it is called capital punishment. okay, or death penalty. The second word is when you punish a person based on the evidence that you created, a circumstantial evidence based on what happened and who was there and all that, we sometimes create, we call it circumstantial evidence. He was convicted based on circumstantial evidence, which means it could depend upon where he was at that time, what he was doing, or what we call his alibi, what he was doing then. Based on that, you create some evidence. It's called circumstantial evidence. The other word is corporal punishment, something very harsh in terms of punishment. We often refer to it when we speak about children, disciplining children. We say we should not give corporal punishment to children, which means beating them or kicking them or hitting them on the head, or sometimes making them stand outside in the sun for a long time. You know, all that is called corporal punishment. Punishment is very harsh. The other words related to crime are words like swindle, cheat, fraud. All that means that all these things, when we fool people, when we cheat people into doing things. So these are words we use for that: cheat, swindle, and also fraud. Now, there are some people who follow the law to the T. They make sure that every aspect of the law is followed. We refer to them as law abiders. They are people who abide by the law. They follow the law. Okay, they are called law abiders. Another set of criminals that we refer to, one is a psychopath, who is a killer by habit. Sometimes psychopaths kill a lot of people and they don't have a sense of guilt, and they're very dangerous people to be around. So we hear of people called psychopaths. It's kind of a mental disorder for them, and there's a passion to kill. They're called psychopaths. When a crime is committed in large numbers, like we had in Hitler's Nazi Germany, we refer to it as a genocide. When there is crime, or when there is killing or mass killing happening for a cause, we refer to it as genocide. When someone has committed a murder through very meticulous planning, it was like it's the opposite of committing a murder in self-defense. I mean, you were not ready, you did not plan to commit the murder, but someone attacked you, you had no option but to hit the person or kill the person, stab the person. That's called responding in terms of self-defense. But if you've carefully planned a murder, we refer to it as premeditated crimes or premeditated murder, where you've planned it beforehand. Okay, premeditated murder, as opposed to killing someone because of as a kind of self-defense. Now, when we always speak about a judiciary, we use a word called loopholes, which means many criminals can get away with the crime. They can escape the law, they can escape the crime if they have a good lawyer who can find out the loopholes. Law is what we call a loophole. They can use that to in some way make the accused not get convicted. So it's called a loophole in the law. And the person who commits the crime is called an accused, and the person who is at the receiving end of the crime is called a victim. Similarly, when we have cyber crimes, people who enter and take and kind of encroach into your account, steal your money, break your password, they are called hackers. And all crimes related to the electronic media, through the internet, we refer to it as cyber crimes. So I've taken you through different vocabulary that you can use when it comes to crime. Many of these words could be familiar, some of them could be words you're not familiar with, and it's very, very important that we know how to be able to use the right words when we want to speak about this topic, which is a very, very common topic that we discuss these days. Okay, now we are going on to our next section, which is Say It Right. This is your guide to good pronunciation. In many of the previous episodes, you must have seen that I've been bringing in words for you which we tend to mispronounce. Now, this is what I'm continuing with again today, and this time I have brought in some words from French, but these are loan words from French into English, but they are not unfamiliar words. These are words that we definitely use very commonly. So, it's good to know how we pronounce them right, isn't it? So, let's start off with the first word. The first word is the word chauffeur. See, the word begins with a CH and the word is a chauffeur. We refer to a chauffeur-ridden car, and chauffeurs are, we refer to them as drivers who come in white uniform. They have a cap and they look very smart. Now, a chauffeur is someone who drives the car of a rich and famous person. When you have, so that's how the word initially came in. The drivers of the rich and the famous were often referred to as chauffeurs, though now we kind of refer to them to all those what you would call, they would have a uniform and they would look quite smart. Those are the kind of people we call chauffeurs, or in a way they're the people who drive big cars and all, they call chauffeurs. And that word is a French loan word into English, and I am sure that's a word we all are familiar with. It's so wonderful. When you speak, I would love to have a chauffeur driven car. It means you would love to have a nice fancy car with a driver. Okay, we refer to words like that. The next word we have for you is the word entrepreneur. Now, entrepreneur is a word which is slightly confusing in terms of pronunciation, primarily because it starts with an E. It is E-N-T-R-E-P-R-E-N-E-U-R. Now, that's a spelling. It's a rather long word, and that word is slightly tricky because it begins with an E. So, you would assume it is pronounced entrepreneur, but it's not entrepreneur, it is entrepreneur, entre. Okay, because this word is a derivative from French, and in French that's how it's pronounced. So, it's nice that we speak or we pronounce the word in the right way. And an entrepreneur, of course, we've discussed this word before. It refers to people who start off a new initiative, a new business. Okay, so if you want to say, I've always wanted to become an entrepreneur, because that's been my dream. It means you've always wanted to start your own business. The next word is, well, this word I am not very sure if you've come across this word. It is a common word. Most people don't use it. Perhaps you must have seen it in writing, or you may not be too comfortable using it, primarily because you would not know how to pronounce this word. Okay, and the word is F-A-U-X-P-A-S. It's pronounced faux pas. Okay, the X and the S and all are silent. Now, this word you will see it in quite a few instances in writing, and if you actually watch English shows and all that word comes in very commonly. It's just that we may not use it very commonly here. This word refers to, and being a French word, the pronunciation is also kind of tricky. It's faux pas. Okay, and the word basically means when something goes wrong, when you make a mistake, when you make a wrong move, that's when we use that word. Okay, a false step. If you remember it like that, a false step, then I'm sure that word will be slightly more easier for you. F-A-L-S-E, faux pas, a false step. Some words in the English language are often derived from the place of the location from where it has come in. One such word is the word mayonnaise. It's actually a word which refers to the region of its origin. Now, mayonnaise is a word which is very common, and this is because mayonnaise is available in our supermarket stores. We use it. We use it on our we use it to spread on our bread, and it's a very common sauce kind of a thing which we use. Now, mayonnaise, the pronunciation can be quite tricky. This word was popularized, or this was popularized by the French. So, it's made out of a little bit of flour and egg, and it has a buttery feel and taste to it. It's wonderful as a spread. Sometimes we use it in salads, sometimes we use it as a spread, and it gives a nice distinctive flavor to the dish. So, it's quite popular these days. Sometimes we use it as a dip for our chips and all that. So, the word is mayonnaise, and we also use it in a contracted form as mayo. Okay. So, that's another word that was popularized by the French, and I hope you've got the pronunciation right for that one. Okay, now we'll go on to a final French word which I'm going to introduce to you, is the word souvenir. spelt S-O-U-V-E-N-I-R, souvenir. Okay, souvenir means in memory of something. So when you go on a holiday or when you visit another country, you would have bought a t-shirt. Like if you go to Paris, you might buy a t-shirt with an image of the Eiffel Tower, or you might buy a fridge magnet with with an image of the Alps mountains. This is in memory of the place that you've gone to. So the literal meaning of the word souvenir is also memory. So it's something that we buy for our loved ones when we go on a journey. You go on a trip somewhere, you buy a souvenir for your loved ones. So that's called a souvenir. So you see, all these words are very common, except perhaps a faux pas. All the other words are common, and it's good to know how we pronounce them straight. We had words like chauffeur, we had words like souvenir, we had words like mayonnaise, and I also introduced the word faux pas. So all these are words that you will be able to use, and it's always good to know how to use them correctly. And of course, I forgot a very, very important word that I showed you this time, entrepreneur. Very useful, very common word. That's a French expression, and you need to know how to use it or pronounce it effectively. Now, we are going on to the last section for today, which is Let's Talk, your guide to good conversation. The aim of this particular section is to bring in all that we've learnt in the previous sections into a conversation. And I've kept the conversations very simple so that you will be able to pick it up quickly and use them. So words by themselves or grammar by itself is no use unless you can use it to speak and make it part of your conversation. So this time I have a small conversation between two friends regarding road safety, or regarding the precautions you need to take to be safe on the road. So we'll just take them as A and B. So A says, put your seatbelt on, to which B responds, why? And A continues, because it will protect you in case of an accident. B is not too keen on that, so he says, but it's uncomfortable. I don't want to wear it, it's uncomfortable. And A is quite stern with that. His friend says, it's the law and it's common sense. Do you really want to compromise your safety for comfort? Okay, it's the law, it's common sense. Do you really want to compromise your safety for comfort? Okay, when he hears that, B has a rethink about it and he says, well, I guess you're right. So then A says, hold your breath till we get there. So what he's trying to tell him is, I know it's uncomfortable, just hold your breath till we get there. And then B says, okay, my seatbelt is on. Now A then tends to reflect on, and he says, honestly, I'm surprised why we flout traffic rules so easily. Flout means why we just disregard, why we don't obey. I wonder why we flout traffic rules so easily. I see so many bikers refusing to wear helmets and parents who don't attach child seats in their car. And so he expresses his concern over that, and B winds it up by saying, I couldn't agree more, though I have to admit I don't like to follow these rules either. Couldn't agree more means I completely agree with you, though I have to admit I don't like to follow these rules either. Okay, so that's a casual conversation between two friends. One person who is trying to tell his friend or convince him of the importance of using a seat belt for car safety, and the other one being slightly resistant but slowly coming around to understand why he has to do so. Okay, that was the conversation we had, and with this we are coming to an end of today's section, and I hope you have ample takeaways that you can use both in your speaking and in your writing. Thank you.